Okay, so these are the types of resources that I'm looking and I'm thinking about when I go to Bob Downey Branch. And I've made this really elaborate map here. If you're familiar with Longdale, Longdale's like right here. This is the entrance to Longdale. It's a low water crossing that's been closed for a little while. This is a dam right here, and this is a small dam. This is the Tri-County area. I'm going to show you pictures of those places so that you can envision them a little bit better. But when I go to these places, I'm thinking about brook trout, number one, in terms of it's our management indicator species. So we use brook trout as sort of a surrogate for everything else that's going on, especially in these cool water streams. Salamanders, crayfish, insects, mussels, they all require that connectivity. All different types of reasons, all different parts of their life history. And for example, I'll just go with brook trout because people tend to like them, but everything up here has a need for connectivity. What we find is in a lot of places, the cool water is upstream in shaded areas, deep pools, and a place like Simpson Creek may warm up because there's a lot of influx of a lot of different creeks. And in the summer, this time of year, those brook trout will try to get upstream and just try to hunker down because we're at the edge of their range, the southern edge of the brook trout range. So they're more of a cool water species, but they really like cold water. So they're going to be looking for that. Another reason that we want to keep connectivity is abiotic, which is not living, but the substrates. I don't know if you've ever noticed it. It's in low water crossings, but all the substrate of a stream moves downstream during high flows. And if you ever get on YouTube, you can see videos underwater during fairly high flows, and it just looks like tumbleweeds. All those rocks are moving constantly, all the way down. And sometimes if you have like a low water bridge on your property, it just backs up all that rock and substrate. All that needs to move down, and what we'll see in some of the pictures is some of these dams will be holding a lot of that stuff back, a lot of the substrates. They also hold woody debris, which is super important to move through the system. It's the food for the insects, it's the cover for the fish. So this is where Ed brought me to. This is at this crossing right here. This is the road right here. And this is the culvert that was turned into it's called a bottomless arch. So we invested a lot of money in this bottomless arch. I'll draw a little picture of what a bottomless arch is. Usually you have a culvert, say this is a road, you'll have a culvert underneath it, it's just a tube. Well, they tend to rot out, and they tend to shoot a lot of water and make a big, deep pool that the fish can't get up. So what we do is we put a bottomless arch. Here's the road again, here's the stream, and the substrates move through, the fish move up and down. The difference is probably $80,000 to $100,000 versus $25,000. So very important to know that it's a good investment to put it in there to put a bottomless arch. There's lots of other types of culverts that are in between those numbers, but here's a beautiful bottomless arch. Here's the Tri-County Road where you're standing, and I looked upstream and I thought, what's that? There's a dam right there. So as a fisheries biologist and a person who grew up in New England, the first thing I say is, let's get rid of that thing. There's no reason for it. And when they had the equipment here, why didn't they just pull it out?
That's not a CCC dam.
And I'll get to that. But that was part of the issue of, I believe, when they originally did the road work. We have a lot of respect, and we're kind of taught, like, if you think it's an archaeological site or some sort of structure you don't understand, talk to some other people. Don't just take your excavator, which I would have done, and just pull that thing out and said, yay, fish. We're just multi-use and we're multifaceted. So, but this picture right here is this upper little dam right here. I'll show you some more pictures of it.
How long has that dam been in there?
This is what they found, or what Dan found, that it was built in the 1950s. It has an unusable fish passage. If you look at it more closely, there's like a tube or a hole in there that's just blocked up, but I think they had originally put that to try to let fish through. It probably had a door or something so that you could, I'm not quite sure about that. But it's associated with the resources of Longdale. So it is part of that whole Longdale system. It wasn't CCC built, and if you read the things, originally the CCC folks who were doing that camp had put a bunch of log dams in, backed up water for the use of the camp and the rec site with a log dam that they just built out of logs. Well, about probably 10 or 15 years, they're not going to last that long. They blew out, and then they put this structure in. because there was still a need for water. In fact, that one upstream, the one that we were just looking at, which this is the other pictures of it, this was put in the latest because in 1950 or so, after when the Tri-County Road was rebuilt, I guess people were thinking, hey, this road's going to sediment maybe downstream. We want to have our water coming from upstream of that road, so they put this one in. And you know, if you have any questions about this, we'll talk about it later. If it fits into your timeline of what you think happened out there, because you know I don't have much way of you know checking it except through this professional who talked to a lot of people. But you might have other ideas. So this is just a few other viewpoints of this. You can see there's some wood hung up on it. It's got a little section in the middle that allows some water to come over it. It's backfilled with a lot of sediment. That sediment that I told you, all the different types of sediment, really fines, spawning gravels, larger cobbles, and they're all stuck behind there. And here's that sort of fish passage thing is what I think Dan gleaned from some of his conversations with people. I'm not sure exactly, but it doesn't work. So that's what you see if you look at that upper dam. About midway down, so when I was out there in the field, I went up and looked and I said, well, you know, look at this little dam. Let's try to, utilize the money we put in and try to get this stream system opened. And I walked downstream and here was another dam. So there's a lot of barriers on that stream. This one you can see is really holding back a lot of wood and gathering stuff. It's a little hard to see here. It's right here. It's totally backfilled with sediment. It's probably about 4 or 5 feet high. That was in the 1940s. They built this one to replace those log dams, and it's also associated with with Longdale Recreation Area. And that's what I asked Dan. I said, what is this? So it's an associated resource. I didn't know what that meant. Is that a legal term? Is that? And he said, no, it just means it's part of it and it's connected. This is the next thing that I was looking at in terms of a barrier to fish passage and aquatic passage is the crossing that goes right into the pavilion area that's been closed for a few years. This is, you can see it's a lot of poured concrete. There's some culverts in here that have kind of crushed down, and that's why the middle is all slumped, and fish can't get over. In fact, there's a lot of dace right now just hanging down in the pool below it. Just, I don't know if they want to move or what, but there's a lot of those sitting right there. So this was another thing that I had Dan look at. This was built in the 1960s. Like I said, it collapsed. That was just in the 2000s, fairly recently. It's been closed to public use, but it's not historically significant. It's something that was definitely added much later, and it's not really part of it wouldn't be considered part of that district of the Longdale Furnace or the green pastures kind of area. And this is the main CCC dam. I had him look at this, and I think some people got really riled because they heard there was like this study of how to take out all these dams and remove them. My thought was, if I get this guy who knows how to figure out historical significance, we might as well have him look at the main dam while he's there. I really didn't have, as a fisheries biologist, I would definitely say let's pull that dam. As a historian or somebody who grew up in that area, be like, no, that's like the main function of that really had brought the swimming area and is a main part of the use of Longdale Furnace. So I never really had any intention of doing that, but this would be the first step to have this guy look at it, and it would be helpful information for you folks who are interested in the historical part of it. It's an awesome thing when you go out there. I don't know if you guys have ever seen pictures of it being built, but it's all handmade. It's got a lot of rock work, and it's filled with concrete, and it backs up this big. Here it is in the woods, and it backs up a pond. I don't know. It's probably a couple of acres. Of course, like all obstructions in a stream system, there's a lot of stuff coming down. There's a lot of large woody debris coming down, and it fills up the pond. So in the past, there was a lot of work just to maintain it and pull out all the stuff that had fallen in, whether it's just leaves and detritus or large wood, to make it ready for the next season. So it also has some internal functions of opening and closing, and those tend to not last very long if you don't use them, and especially in a wet environment.
Now that has some way to open it, right? Stephen?
Yeah, I didn't put all of Dan's pictures. All these pictures are from Dan himself, so I'll give him some credit on there. And over on this side, on the right side, looking upstream, there's a big crank that you can open up a door and drain the whole pond and look at all the stuff that ended up in there, and maybe get a tractor in there and pull all the stuff out and close it back up. And I'm not sure exactly what sort of condition it's in at this point, because it has not been really worked in a number of years.
Do we know when the last time was drained, or? I could ask Liz, she might know.
Yeah, I would
She
say
has
it's been 5 or 6 years, I think, at least. You know, it hasn't been recently at all.
Is it just left at completely
been longer
closed,
than
or
that.
only
Yeah.
overclosed?
It's
or
leaking
is
a little bit. I took a picture of it this week.
Yeah, I didn't look at it that closely to know, to tell you.
There's a
Steve's got
structure
some-
on top of it there that they used to open it. There's about a
Yeah.
16-inch pipe that they used
can
to
pass
drain
that
it, maybe
around.
20 inches on that. But there's some type of a mechanism that you spin it and it opens.
Right.
They used to drain it from 3 to 5 years and clean out the structure above, clean out all the debris,
Right.
the leaves and all, about 3 to 5 years.